prepare, respond, serve. This is 5 Stone. The contents of this podcast are the personal opinions and views of 5 Stone and our affiliates. This is not a recommendation for medical practice or a guide for decision making or even to take place for your own personal judgment. We recommend that you always seek out in-person professional training and always follow your established policies and procedures. Now, with that said, let's get after it. All right, guys, welcome back to 5 Stone. This is Eric and John, and we have a very special guest today with us that we are just tickled to death to have here, Mr. Andrew Cooperrider.
Well, hey, thank you for having me on. And, this pot of coffee you made, better than the last one.
So
you did a pretty good job on this
appreciate
one.
it. So Andrew got here today, and I tried to do something. I'm trying to learn. So I never had poured over coffee until I went to Brewed in Lexington. So I went out and I got this just for today. And I should have just waited till you got here because the first batch was not very good. So we had a whole chemistry lesson on the right way to make coffee, and I'm getting there. Slowly.
It worked in a pinch.
Oh, do what?
It worked in a pinch.
That's right. Yeah. But it's good coffee. I appreciate you, man. So we got Andrew on the show today to bring awareness, I guess, to kind of what's been going down all across the country, especially here in Kentucky, and how it impacts the citizens of the state, how it impacts our businesses and our families, and kind of what you've done to overcome some challenges that you faced and how that can maybe help other people to overcome some challenges, not only here in Kentucky, but across the country, kind of what you're doing, and kind of bring to light the seriousness of the matter so people that's listening to this understands really on a deep level that can empathize, not just sympathize, but empathize with the struggle that's going on with everybody that's having to suffer through these hard times right now. So that's what we're here for today. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, family, all this, kind of where you're at now with Brewed and everything. Just kind of go through it, man.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I actually grew up outside of Cleveland in a little town called Chardon, Ohio. And I moved to Lexington when I was like 16, 17. I did 1 year of high school, actually, in Lexington. Yeah. So, but no, I mostly grew up there up in northeastern Ohio. And I graduated high school and I just kind of did some different stuff until I found out I was pretty good at sales. And I did door-to-door sales actually for years and years and years. I sold vacuums for 2 years door-to-door.
Really?
Yeah, I did. So
no shame in the game, man. That's fine.
It was Rainbow Vacuums, right?
That's all right.
Hey, I was doing okay. So we were kind of looking around, and we came across a restaurant that was for lease. That was a good situation in Wilmore, Kentucky. And we said, okay, let's look at this restaurant business and kind of see where that is. It was a different type of business than what we were doing, and so it was something we were interested in trying out. And in 2019, August of 2019-ish, right around there, is when we started the restaurant there in Wilmore. So, and, I'm married, so I have my wife, and she'd been a server for 7-8 years, and I'm a pretty good cook and stuff. And so,
what type of restaurant was it?
It was, it was like a pizza kind of burger kind of place. See, the town of Wilmore
huge
is so big, let me tell you. But no, we were it is a tiny town for those who don't know.
We've been there.
That. Yeah.
Done training there.
Yeah, you blink going through it and you've seen it all. But it had only a Chinese food place open for dinner up until we opened. So we opened, and part of the reason why you didn't have a lot of restaurants was because, quite honestly, you can't, there's no kitchens. And so in order to build out a full kitchen, it's a $50,000, $60,000 investment. In a small town, that's a lot to invest on a whim.
Wow.
Of the economy of scale there. So this is one of those, and basically we did the best we could with the facilities we had there. And, it was a business model that worked. We worked a little bit in it, but, it was profitable enough. We weren't coming away with tons of money, but, we'd profit $2,000-3,000 a month off the place. And, we're pretty happy. I mean, we had another business too. And so we started rolling out delivery, and it started doing even better. And then COVID hit.
Right.
And that particular spot out in Wilmore had like 8 tables. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. It was a small joint. That's why we rolled out delivery to be able to up our profits, right?
Makes sense.
So COVID hits, and honestly, we're not doing all that bad because we're like the only thing other than one other pizza shop over in Nicholasville, Kentucky, that delivered in this small town. So we weren't doing too bad. And then where one of the larger mistakes, so there's a couple of mistakes I think these governments did in COVID lockdown.
Okay.
The first mistake they did was the first initial lockdown. Everybody's unsure. It should have been almost a total complete lockdown for a very short amount of time, like 2 weeks, and just like completely closed down 2 weeks.
Yep.
The second mistake they made was then how they opened, because what we're seeing now is lockdown fatigue. Why? Because if you own a restaurant in Kentucky, you know this. We have gone from 25, 33, 50, 25, 33, up and down, different closing hours, different limitations. It's been a roller coaster ride. And that is creating part of this lockdown fatigue you're seeing out of business owners and other individuals is the fact that the rules just keep changing. It'd be better to be, okay, you're either fully closed or you're fully open. That's it, on and off. And basically we're full bore going. And then if we're worried about hospital capacity, we come out, we say, okay, this is our number. It is a set number. Once we roll over this many ICU beds occupied by COVID, we then close everything back down for 2 weeks. And then we open everything back up again, go full bore. Right?
Okay, yeah. I guess because if you have all these inconsistencies, then how do you plan to operate a business?
And it creates
fluctuating.
fatigue. Yeah. It just creates fatigue, right? You just get tired of it. You just get tired of having to deal with it. So, so what they did, and why that plays into it, so what they did was they opened up, I think the first time around to 33% or 25%.
I can't remember.
The first one I remember was 33%.
33. Okay. So they opened up to 33%. And going back to what I said, I had 10 tables. Now I only had 3. But where that took a hit for us, that was on our delivery and carryout. Because what ended up happening is offices are opening back up. Now, Wilmore, Kentucky is a bedroom community, right? So for those who don't know what a bedroom community means, it means people live there, but they don't work there. They work in Lexington. And on your way from Lexington is grocery stores, is places to grab takeout from and things like that. And so, and especially in a town like Wilmore, that's mainly families, you're not going out to eat all the time. And on the nights you're maybe planning it out a little bit more. Compared to when you're locked inside your house, cooking 3 times a day, and the grocery store is really far away, you're more likely to start delivering a little more often. Ordering delivery. And so our business took like a major hit because we could only serve, and don't get me wrong, I mean, our 3 tables were full all the time, but it just wasn't enough customers to keep going. And we had already taken out the EIDL and PPP loans for that business. And so we're sitting there and watching what's going on with our numbers for like a month or so. We've got this PPP EIDL loans looming that we need to pay off that we're just pulling away from to try to keep this place going. And our lease was coming up due. So we said, well, this business is sunk. We're not going to renew our lease here, but we have these EIDL loans we need to pay back. We need to figure out a way to do it. So we pivoted. Now, I don't know if anybody else remembers, but when Andy Bashir, our governor here, first lifted the lockdown orders, he said he wasn't going to lock down again.
Right.
And so looking at that, looking at 33%, looking at the fact that a lot of people were working from home, we said, a coffee shop, especially a larger one, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And we found this coffee shop that was literally, it's like 4 minutes down the road from us. Our house is literally on the same road as the coffee shop.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we see this coffee shop very close by. And keep in mind, we live in Lexington. We've been owning a place in Wilmore, so we've been driving 30, 40 minutes every day back in, so being 5 minutes down the road was nice. And this particular coffee shop was a coffee shop before, so the community's used to going there for coffee. And it had like a lot of stuff in it. And I haven't gone around measuring all the other sitting areas of coffee shops in Lexington, but if it is not the largest, it is really close to the largest.
It's a really big place.
Yeah.
Coffee shop. And so when you've got the capacity restrictions and everything else going on, it made a lot of sense.
Right.
And so we leased that spot, and it was relatively a good deal on the lease there. And so we leased the spot. We have people come out. We're large enough where we can seat a lot of people. People are working from home, everything else. So going at the spot, and at the same time, we also recognize that Lexington has a fair amount of coffee shops, 24-ish, I believe, coffee shops in the city of Lexington. So having that many coffee shops, sorry, I got to take a drink.
I don't blame you.
That good coffee. I made that, by the way. So if that's good, it's
a little salty. It's got a little fruit to it. It's perfect. It tastes like Tyrant Steers.
That's what that is.
But so, how do we use this time where people are going to see us to then stand out and create a loyal, long-standing customer base? And that's where being a pour-over bar came from. That's something that's popular. You'll see them out in California a lot and places like that, but not real popular around here. So we started this coffee shop, and the nature of our space, who we're targeting, and everything else is quite clear. It's dine-in people. I mean, that's who we're targeting, right? And there was many times where, you could not get a table. In fact, over the summer, Amy McGrath, Mitch McConnell, Brad Barron, Annie Barr, all their Fayette County campaigns worked out of our coffee shop. Sometimes at the same time.
And you're right there close to the University of Kentucky. So
right. And then Sundays at like 2:00, we were packed full of students all studying and everything else. So, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh man, it was going amazing and everything else. But there was certainly, we were breaking even. We were covering our bills. Now, me and my wife hadn't paid ourselves out of there, and we were working probably 30, 40 hours a week on it. But at the same time, we know that you're kind of growing, and we recognize that.
Yeah, that's
right?
par for the course on
restaurants. And to be quite honest, we weren't paying ourselves, but to be at break even 3 months into a restaurant coffee shop type business is pretty good. That's pretty good.
Impressive.
And so, and we know, we got to grow our following, and so we're working on that, and then. We did a lot of events. So Brewed, the name Brewed, on top of the fact we fresh brew your coffee, but also we serve beer. And so served beer. Yeah. We're working on fixing that. And so because we serve beer and coffee and everything else, we called ourselves Brewed. And we would do a fair amount of events in the evening, some trivia, some live music. We had a hip hop, rap, and R&B night that got a little wild sometimes, which and then we actually had to cut that out when they started lighting off fireworks in our parking lot. And we were like, I was like, all right,
that's funny.
I don't know how much they're enforcing curfew right now, but if you're out there setting off fireworks, right? Now that being stated, we. We followed the spacing guidelines by the CDC. We followed our limiting guidelines as far as seating goes. We follow the mask rules to the extent that we can. I personally, from the very get-go, if I have to be honest, did not like the idea of our staff having to enforce it. I think the way we approach the mask mandate of saying we're not going to go after the customers, we're going to go after the businesses, and then what you're asking for is a bunch of people, what's called space paid, a bunch of college students who are paid $8, $9, $10, $11 an hour to talk to people about wearing a mask as they come in, and so basically, we would say, hey, we have a sign up now that clearly spells it out. We require masks. if you're not wearing one, we're just going to assume you have medical condition, and just kind of let you make your choice. Because especially in a restaurant, that guideline there is one of the stupidest ones in the world, because you come in wearing a mask, but then when you sit down, you take off the mask.
Right.
And I'm unsure if just COVID spreads when you're standing, but when you're sitting, it doesn't.
It's crazy.
I'm unsure on how all that works. But one of the silliest things I've ever done in my life is walk in, talk to a host stand. The host says, "Oh, can you put on a mask?" I just walked in. I forgot to put one on. And so I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And I put one on. And then she seats me at a table that, I'm not kidding you, literally, she turned her back and put the menu on the table. And so I literally walked like 10 feet from the door with the mask on, then sat down, took it off. I'm like, this is what the heck's going on here?
Yeah.
And so, and you know, too, what's funny is, well, we'll get back around to that, but you know, we weren't like outspoken about, you know, anything to do with it. And it was fine. We're plugging away. And then we go from 50% capacity to completely closed for indoor dining. And this is where a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people think coffee, that's the easiest to go thing in the world. Well, yeah, I sell coffee, but what I was really selling was a space where you can sit, you can work, be away from the house, not have to pay for a co-working space or things like that.
The experience.
I'm
Right.
that's not, coffee isn't the only thing I'm providing.
Right.
I'm providing a community space. And also as well, when you don't have a drive-through, it means that you have to, and you're not like a fast food place. Like Starbucks is basically fast food, right? They've got their processes, Dunkin' Donuts, where they can knock it out. And this is what kills local business. This is what a lot of people don't understand. They sit there and they say, well, McDonald's can survive with carryout. Or my favorite right now, I don't know if you guys know this, Chipotle apparently is only doing mobile app orders. So they lock their like front doors.
Really?
And you have to place your order on the app, and then they'll run it out to you. And
Well, if you want to drop, $300,000-$400,000 on some app services, then you can.
But the only reason why they can afford to do
Exactly.
that is what do you get at Chipotle if you go?
The burrito.
Right. And what do you get on it?
I mean, typical,
Yeah, just what do you normally get on
chicken,
it? Okay.
Some salsa,
Okay.
cheese, sour cream.
Right.
Typical burrito.
And if you're in a city like Lexington, you're driving around and you're thinking about where am I going to eat? You're thinking about what you're hungry for. Mm-hmm. And you say, I'm hungry for a burrito. Are you going to go to that local Mexican restaurant or are you going to go to Chipotle? Which one do you know the menu of? Which one do you know what your expectations are?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's something a lot of people don't understand about why these large organizations of restaurants are doing fine. Well, mom and pop stores are closing.
Yeah.
When you're out and about,
It's convenient.
your buying behavior
Yeah.
is what you're getting from a restaurant is the service. You come in, you sit down, you look at the menu, they bring over stuff, blah blah blah, right?
Right.
You're not when you're doing to go, what you're getting is food, and what you're getting is convenience. Because at that point, if I'm deciding to not cook at home, but just pick up food on my way home, it's just about what's most convenient for me. And it is not convenient for me to sit out in a parking lot for 30 minutes waiting on my food.
Yeah.
And also now I've got to have the forethought to call you if I don't want to do that, which a lot of people aren't going to do.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to coffee, in much the same way, a lot of people be like, oh, that's the easiest thing to do to go. It's also the easiest thing to do at home, too. It's a lot easier to make a pot of coffee at home than it is to make a burrito at home, right?
Right.
So it's really, and that's where lack of understanding of the business comes from, right? Because you look at Starbucks, you're like, they do to go like crazy. Yeah, they do, and so does McDonald's. But that doesn't mean your local diner's doing a lot of to go.
Right.
It's they may serve the same food, but that doesn't mean they have the same business model.
Well, too, you don't want to compare. There's no reason to compare every business to every other business. You know what I'm saying? Like we talked about this even before the podcast started. Making these blanket orders affects people in different perspective.
Well, and it's crazy too. So, not to get like we talked about, we don't want to get too much into numbers, but a lot of people don't know how they made the decision that restaurants are spreaders. And what it's based upon in most cases. So, like, take for an example, in Kentucky, or actually in Nashville, they did their own study about it. They found bars were not a major spreader. They then tried to hide that from getting out to the public.
I remember that.
Because the bars were closed, and if it came out, the bars would be pissed. So,
Right.
And what's funny is in that, so the study they're using is a CDC study done where they surveyed around 150 people who tested positive and 150 people who tested negative. Basically just asked them what you did. And the people who tested positive were 2 times more likely to have gone to restaurants than people who tested negative. Now, I don't know about you, but just in general, if I'm more likely to go out and about, I'm more likely to get COVID. And also when I'm out and about, I am probably going to get something to eat.
Yeah.
If I'm out and about, there's one thing I'm always going to do, which is get something to eat. So, anyways, but they had a separate category for bars and coffee shops. What's funny is in that same study, the people who didn't get COVID, 5% of them had gone to bars and coffee shops. People who did get COVID, 8%. So we're talking about 3-4 different people.
Yeah.
5 different people, 6-7 different people saying they went to bars and coffee shops more than the other group did. Because those 7 people, they decided bars and coffee. But even that is so significantly different than the restaurant, which was 2-1.
Yeah.
And yet they decided to lump bars and restaurants in with together. And then even worse, they opened up restaurants here in Kentucky and kept bars closed, even though that same study said restaurants were worse than bars.
Yeah.
And so, you end up with some interesting decision making to go on. And I think it's just coming from a spot of they don't know what to do. And you don't know as an elected leader,
Yeah.
standing up there and being like, guys, I don't know,
Right.
isn't exactly the idea.
But you know what, though, on the flip side of that, man, if you had a leader, just like as a medical provider, if a patient comes to me and says, hey, here's my symptoms, here's what I got going on, I could gain 10 times more respect, 10 times more, even like patient volume and more, if I just said, I don't know, but we're going to figure this out. You know what I'm saying? Just being honest instead of like, oh, today, here's what we're going to do.
Right.
And then, okay, we'll just try this over here. Effective immediately, this is what's going to happen. And however it impacts, so be it.
But look at, so, and this is where I think, especially people who are, we'll call them Democrats, and so everybody's aware, I don't want to get too much into political parties about it, but this does play into our COVID decisions.
Right.
The Democrats said Trump's inaction, whether it was true or not, caused the COVID deaths. So now you're a Democrat governor. What would your inaction be used? Would it be used against you the same way you used it against Trump in the election?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now you've created a political situation where, to your point, a good leader, a person not playing party politics, would say, guys, I don't know. But
Right.
we're going to figure out something. But I don't want to create a solution that is worse than the problem.
Right.
But because we play party politics, we now have a problem where if I do nothing, I'm going to be attacked because I just said this guy shouldn't be reelected because he did nothing.
Right.
And I've created a no-win situation for me.
Right. Yeah.
And it's and that's what, so when they closed indoor dining, and what we did was we said, hey, we sell coffee. It's $5-6 a cup at the most, right? I mean, my average ticket's like $4 or $5. I can't afford a tent and a propane heater and to run, and keep in mind too, and run extension cords. And during that time too, it snowed several times. Who wants to go do your work
Right.
out there?
Yeah.
In the cold.
It's
right?
December. Let's do outdoor dining
Right. Like,
and make everybody else sick.
And
in the
who's going to
community
sit
from-
out there for several hours on your computer? Keep in mind that's what you're getting from a coffee shop.
Right.
Right.
And so it's not going to happen. And so I said, here's what we'll do. We're going to open up this here door, just off the ground a little bit. When it's warmer, we'll open it farther. When it's colder, we'll close it a little bit more. And we'll just let people sit out here because, what is a patio? Right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's basically what we said. We said, and based on what I understood, the reason why indoor dining was of concern was because air ventilation. Now, this is what's funny too, and I find to be complete BS. A lot of these things they left open, like Rupp Arena and the casinos and things,
Right.
their defense for leaving it open was, well, they had upgraded ventilation systems. Why wasn't I offered that same possibility as a restaurant? Are you telling me if I upgraded my ventilation system, I could also remain? I mean, that's the argument for airplanes.
Right.
They have fantastic ventilation systems. So if I'm able to upgrade or achieve a airflow amount that I'm supposed to, why can't I stay open just like an airplane will? Why can't I stay open just like Rupp Arena or the casinos can? Right. And that wasn't an option afforded to us. Instead, it was, no, you had to close. And so we said, well, we're opening up this door. We're being safe, everything else. And we even posted on our Facebook, listen, because of our unique interior, all of our seating areas are open. Right.
So at this time, just to clarify, so this time you all have had no word or feedback from environmental health and safety. You were just seeing the guidelines and just making the decisions, and you were taking it within your perspective of what the regulations were, trying to make adaptations to that to keep yourself open and do the best you can do.
And what the heart of the regulation was. Why do they want us eating outside? Well, because of airflow. That's the scientific reason.
Right.
So I'm trying to do that. Well, Tuesday. So the order went into effect on the 18th at 5:00. That following Tuesday morning, a health department lady came in. Now, she just chose some really bad timing. So, first off, I was.
And this was on. Make sure. Well, I don't want to get specific, but is November 24th is what I got.
Yeah,
around
sure.
that time.
That Tuesday
Yeah.
is that
Okay.
Tuesday following, and because the prior day, that Monday, I had worked it myself, because what we'd done is we had one person that normally worked during the day, and we said, listen, we got to lay you off. I don't know how many people are going to show up, and let's keep in mind too. Does anybody know what was going on that week that they closed us? That might affect our business majorly, that where it would have been higher. It was finals week
Ooh.
for UK. And so
Yeah, that's a big deal.
that's a big deal to a coffee shop that mainly works off students studying in their coffee shop, right? Like, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I was telling you, earlier, my mom owns a coffee shop in a small town in Columbia where we live. And there's Lindsay Wilson College is there. And her sitting area is packed with students, especially during that time.
Yeah. And let's keep in mind too, UK had closed all their sitting areas. Literally, the only place you could go study in a group was your dorm or like our coffee shop, right? So that's part of why we had so many people.
Yeah.
So we said, no, we're going to keep up. Well, that first day, because we weren't being super loud about it, we didn't know we were really breaking the rules. At the same time, we didn't want to bring scrutiny. And so the first day, and keep in mind, we're going from doing much more than this. That first day, Monday, we did $100 in business that entire day, right?
Wow.
So I'm like, gosh, this really sucks. I'm like, uh-oh. I've got rent due here in a couple months, and I'm already working, 80 hours between me and my wife. I literally, I'm going to have to fire my entire staff if this continues.
Yeah.
And the next day, by the time the health department lady came in at 9:30, because people started realizing we were open and you could come study at it, we'd done already $200 in revenue that day. So we did double what we did the entire day in our first 2 hours of business.
Yeah.
So I was like, awesome.
Right.
But she also chose the wrong time because of who those customers were. And she walks in, she looks around and sees some people in there. She goes, you can't be having people in here. And I was like, oh, my door's open. Can I open it more for you? Open the front doors and side doors? She's like, no, you had to kick them all out. And I was like, geez, I really disagree. And so she's like, well, you got to close. And I'm like, well, no. I'm like, I'm not going to. I think this is just fine. This is safe. This is fulfilling your wants and needs out of your COVID concerns. And, I think this is fine. So I'm not going to close. And also keep in mind where my mind's at, right? I'm going to have to fire my entire staff, probably have to not pay my rent, my personal rent that month, to make sure we make the rent on the coffee shop, because I did $100 yesterday, and then that day I'm like, wow, we're at $200 already on the day. Like maybe we're going to go back to doing the amount of revenue we were doing every day last week, right? And for people who don't understand, but restaurants and stuff, we operate off razor thin margins.
Yeah.
You know, it is a game that we're playing of, and hopefully a lot of people understand small business as a whole operates that way, as we've seen so many of them close by just missing a couple of months of business. And, you know, that's what's most concerning too about everything is that I don't think the average American understands that 83% of the U.S. is small business. I don't think they understand that the average small business only employs, the average business in America employs only 18 people. And so
I wasn't aware of that.
I don't think people realize the average CEO's salary is only $130,000 a year.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, that's a good salary, but still, you know, when you hear some people go out there and talk about it, that view business is almost a endless source of cash that are never paying their fair share. What they do is they talk about, you know, these corporations like Amazon or Walmart or things like that make billions in profit, even though they're operating off the same margins we do. But the only difference is you know, 3% of 100 billion is just raw numbers, a lot more cash than 3% of 100,000, right? And so they stump for rules, regulations and they're making these ideas based upon these large companies, not realizing how much small business exists. And when you make that rule that says, like I said, not to get too much into politics, but we got to understand how these people think that are making these decisions in government, because they have never built a thing themselves. Like hardly anybody in government has ever built a thing. They're mostly lawyers.
Yeah.
And even if they own their own law firm, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk. That's not really owning your own business.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not really. It's working for yourself maybe, but even if that fails, you still have a pretty good degree and gig to fall back on, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same thing as just being a person who can cook and has worked and saved to then goes to open up a restaurant that has nothing to fall back on.
Right, and that's part of the questions that I had was like, so you said you were sitting there thinking, man, I'm going to have to fire my employees. Well, I think a lot of people don't realize that as a business owner, you are responsible not only for I've got to have enough money to feed my own family and have my own housing and things like that, pay my own bills. But if I fail these people.
Well,
these people got to have food. They got kids. You're rolling on the time of year Christmas is getting ready to come up.
Right.
It's cold. It's cold. They're going to lose their heat. They're going and
people who want to sit there saying, no, these business owners don't really care about their employees. Rewind for a couple seconds here. Remember, I just said I hadn't paid myself out of the business.
Right.
But I was paying my staff.
Right.
So I was not paying myself so I could pay others for months and months and months up to this point. So let's not forget that. Okay, so it's not about not taking care of our employees. Of course it is. But also, too, let's pretend that our unemployment system worked. Okay? And let's pretend for 1 second, if I did lay off that staff, their entire income would immediately, the next day, be given to them. And so in that way, in my mind, I don't have to worry about how they're going to pay their bills. Let's remember how unemployment is actually funded. So unemployment is 100% funded by small business. And the amount small businesses pay is determined upon a couple of things. The first thing is how much money is in the overall account. So there's 4 A, B, C, D, E. Yeah. There's 4 different levels you pay, right? And so depending on how much overall money is in the reserve account, it depends on if you're on A, which is the best, or E, which is the worst percentage payout. And that system that's statewide, right? So everybody's on A or everybody's on E, okay? So everybody knows Kentucky went from being A to E, which is important. But also, within that graph, you have your own percentage of payroll you have to pay. So this isn't a tax on profits. So if I pay you $100, I have to pay into unemployment, let's say $3, 3%. Okay. Well, you can go from all the way as low as 0.1% to 10% is the range. And how much you owe is dependent upon your company's on a number of unemployment claims and how much money your company has in its reserves in the state. So that's why whenever you see people that get fired and then try to claim unemployment, you'll see companies fight it.
Right.
It is because the more money that comes out of their reserve for their company, the more they will owe. They could move up another level, and so they could go from paying a small percentage to a high percentage. So let's talk about who's really affected by this. So there are companies in Kentucky that went from paying a 0.1% unemployment tax to 10% unemployment tax.
Goodness.
And you know what's worse about those companies? They're the good ones.
Yeah.
They're the ones that never were laying people off or firing, or if they had to fire somebody, it's because it's absolutely justified on the own actions of that person.
What makes them go to that high percentage?
Well, because
what caused that shift?
they had a low amount of unemployment claims priorly, so they had a large amount in their reserve. And then also Kentucky was on a payment schedule. So they were paying, 0.1%. Well, Kentucky's now on e-payment schedule. So everybody right away has to pay another percent or two. So for some people, that's doubling our unemployment right off the bat. But additionally, because I had a large amount in reserves and I was way down here, but because of COVID, I had to lay a bunch of people off of no fault of their own, so we had to pay out a bunch of unemployment. I now have nothing in my reserves, especially if I paid a lot of money out. So if I was a high-paying employer. So now I'm all the way down to a company maybe that has none in reserves, and I'm on e-payment schedule. So I go from 0.1 to 10%.
I follow you.
So it is the best employers that are most affected by this unemployment change. Yeah. A factory that's on a regular basis laying people off has had their unemployment insurance go up hardly at all because they were always out laying people off. And so their reserves were never full. But if I hadn't laid anybody off in 10 years, so I had a large amount of reserve in my unemployment insurance. And then all of a sudden I had to lay every single person off and it drained my unemployment insurance. I went from 0.1 to 10%.
To build up that reserve again.
Because we got to build up that reserve again. Right? So when they're making these unemployment decisions, let's remember it is coming from the employer too. So on top of losing employers, and that's what's worse too. See, the more employers we lose, the more the other employers have to pay into the unemployment to replenish it.
Jeez.
So there's a lot of misunderstanding of how unemployment works. So laying off, you may say, oh, they'll lay off and they'll get paid. Well, also you're asking now the small business who's losing their money to also pay for that down the road. And so that's why just laying people off and letting unemployment pay it, even if it worked perfectly. Now, here in Kentucky, we have an 80,000 people backlog. But how do we take care of that? Oh, we'll just offer an eviction mortuary. So literally, because the government cannot get unemployment checks out, they have also issued an eviction mortuary. Now, granted, this is coming down from federal government, but the reason, why is it that we need to protect people against getting evicted? Normally, their unemployment checks would then go to paying their rent. So we don't need to protect people who are unemployed for no fault of their own from getting evicted. So why do we need to protect them now? Because we can't get them their checks. I mean, with the current unemployment system, they're even making way more than they were before.
Yeah.
So because we as a state are failing to get the unemployment checks out, we now have to ask now the landlords to be taking the hit on the rent.
Yeah. I have a good friend the same way. He told me yesterday, he said, I have one tenant that owes me nearly $5,000. And I said, I asked him, I said, being in your situation, how does that make you feel like, you need that money from that person, but you know that maybe they don't have it.
Yeah.
You can't evict them legally.
Right. Yeah.
You probably shouldn't evict them.
Morally.
Yeah, morally, right. He was like, I know. He said, I'm stuck.
But he's also running a business.
Yeah. And
he's got to pay for it. So at what point?
Luckily, he's okay financially. You know what I'm saying? He's got that plan. But a lot of people don't have a fallback plan. They have nothing.
And where's that money coming from? I mean, it's coming from their family.
Yeah.
Right? And it's coming not just from their family, but also too and this is the other thing I think people forget as well. What we are giving away is the American dream. What is the American dream? That you can finish better than you started.
Right.
And when you finish, you have something to hand off to your kids.
Yeah.
Then they can build upon that, finish better than they started, and hand something off to their kids, so on and so forth, right? So not just the American dream of saying, I will be better off, but the American dream of saying my kids will be better off than me, their kids will be better off than me. That's the American dream.
Right.
And when we're asking these landlords to foot the bill because the unemployment system can't get the checks out because they've failed, and I'm sorry, it's been 10 months. I don't care what you walked into, but if I'm sitting there saying these people are getting laid off and well, I have caused this because I shut it down, that is it. I mean, I made a post the other day about this on our Facebook where I said, Merry Christmas to everyone. Maybe I deleted it because I thought maybe people wouldn't understand it. But I said something like, Merry Christmas to everyone except for Andy Brashear, who should be working in his office himself clearing out unemployment claims. Yeah. I'm sorry, if I was Andy, I would be not off on Christmas. I would be going through unemployment claims, clearing them out myself if I had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of leadership we need.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
we just talked about this on
Exactly what
well,
it is.
and instead of sitting there saying, "Hey, we're going to pay $14 million to this outside firm," during the Bevin administration, they'd passed, because it used to be you couldn't do this. So, like, let's say you needed more people in unemployment. It used to be you couldn't pull them from other departments, okay, because of budgeting or something like that. Well, under Bevin, they'd put a new rule in place saying you could. So you could pull from other departments into this department to help you out, right? So what if instead of saying, hey, we're going to hire this outside firm, we said something like, hey, for 1 month, we're not going to let anybody retire necessarily. And every single person that works in KRS, Kentucky Retirement Systems, is going to help the unemployment office out. And they're going to get through these claims. Because what's more important, getting checks to people who have no income or helping a person retire this month? What's more important?
You're right.
I mean, getting people their checks is way more important, right? Or if better yet, we say, hey, all those guys who are at home collecting checks that work for the government, but because we close state parks or something, aren't mowing like they normally would, we're going to teach them how to handle unemployment claims.
Yeah.
You know, all those
utilization of your resources.
We paused streets and roads for a little bit there, construction, right, on streets and roads for a little bit. Why don't those people be helping out with handling the situation?
Right.
Yeah.
But instead, we pay $7 million every 3-4 months to an outside firm, and our backlog has done nothing but grow since we started doing that.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, you know, the point being is that, so this is all going through my mind when they come in to close me, and I'm like, no, you don't have an actual other, that's what people don't get, is there isn't another solution out there for these business owners.
Yeah,
literally, your only solution at this point is to say, I'm staying open.
Yeah.
That's it.
So what did your employees voice to you, like their concern? What was their? I'm sure obviously they were worried, but how did you feel hearing that from them? Like, I want people to connect, listen to this. Like, I think they're beginning to see now the picture as you're going through this in detail, but like emotionally, not just numbers, not just facts, not just like emotionally. What kind of burden is that for those people and for you and your family?
So, you know, when it comes to the coffee shop, a lot of our staff part-time, and if I have to be honest, when we said we were staying open anyways, a lot of our staff were like, can we just file for unemployment? And we're like, yeah, we will. However, I own other businesses that have taken significant hits as well.
Right.
And I've had people crying because they won't have an income to be able to co-sign for their daughters to go to college.
Hang on, say that again.
I've had people that I had to lay off.
Okay.
That are crying because they can't send their kid to college now. Not because they can't afford tuition necessarily, but because they literally can't co-sign on the apartment for them because they don't have an income.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
That's deep.
I have people sitting there that were like, "Hey, we got to lay off." That their wife's going through cancer treatments, and they're wondering, what's this mean for that?
Yeah.
I mean, and it has an echo to it. Let's take our coffee for example. Our coffee supplier had no clue how they were going to give a Christmas to their staff, their employees, and their own kids, because their coffee was so down. Right, we use a local roaster. We partner with a local roaster. They do things specifically for us, so you can't get them elsewhere. But we partner with them to get it done. They label it for us, and they pack it and they roast it for us. It's out of Winchester. And they didn't know how they were going to give a Christmas. But because we said no, and we had this outcrying of support, and we started selling so much more coffee, I mean, they were literally crying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a gift to them. And so those are also echoes that go on within the system. And also, too, let's not forget what happens when you close us to indoor dining and all of our customer base switches over to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts because that's drive-through. Now, maybe the franchise, I don't think Starbucks is franchise owned. I think Dunkin' Donuts is, though. Maybe the franchise owner does live in the community, maybe. But Starbucks isn't franchise. So, yeah, they may employ people out of the community, but the people who are making the profits off of that purchase of coffee are not spending that money in the community. They are not buying their beans from a roaster in the community. They are not, then that roaster is now not employing people in the community. Yeah. That roaster's profits are now not being spent in the community. And so it's got an echo to it.
Right.
Right?
There's a connection. Everything is linked on some way because your coffee business is connected to how many other businesses. And then maybe you own a department store, or maybe it's
just a retail shop.
Anything.
Yeah.
You could be sourcing from local craftspeople.
Exactly.
And what happens? I mean, people keep buying, don't get me wrong, but where do they start buying from? The big box retailers that are left open that are not buying from local people.
Right.
Buying online from Amazon that are not buying from local craftsmen and artisan. So the money is still there, but it gets shifted. And that's why we've seen the largest companies, the richest people, get even so much richer. I think I read somewhere. I read somewhere that the top 1% or 10% or whatever, with how much richer they have gotten through COVID, they could pay for our entire stimulus package and just be at the same wealth level they were at when COVID started.
Right. Yeah, I read that too. I think it was Jeff Bezos with Amazon.
Yeah.
How much profit he made since since COVID. I'm not knocking the man by any means.
No,
you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying,
I'm fine with there being major companies as long as we don't have crony capitalism protecting them.
Yeah.
But the reason they got that was because people like you, people like us, are suffering through that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And until these governors and all these legislators sit back and go, you know what? Without the foundation, like we mentioned on another podcast, it's like you have a leader that says, hey, effective immediately do this. Until you get the input from the people who are actually having to do the work and how is this going to affect you, or the people that you're taking the work from, how is this going to affect you? Everything crumbles, right? You've seen the cartoon we talked about last time, to where you've got the boss, okay? Or put it in perspective of a government leader hanging over the cliff on the plank, right, with a gun pointed at the employee. Or take that into example, say your small businesses or whatever. And it's like, you're going to do this or else. They're the ones
who are keeping you up.
Right. It's going to crumble. You have to have that support system. I don't know what it takes for our government leaders to get a grasp of, like, we cannot function this way. That's whenever it begins to tilt to the fact of you see everybody calls conspiracy theorists or the right-wing extremists, but you begin to wonder, is there an intentional thing to hurt small businesses?
Well, and
because I can go to Walmart, I can go to Lowe's, I can go to Home Depot, I can go to Kroger, I can go to any other place I want to, and it is packed. I can go to a venue and have a 33%. Maybe that venue is big enough to hold 1 million people in it. It's okay, 33%. But you can't go inside of a church, or you can't go inside of a coffee shop, or you can't do whatever because it's not okay. Like,
Well, I think-
what gives them the right to cherry pick?
I
Like-
think what it is what we're seeing. So we take how our system worked priorly and we're amplifying it. This is what I mean. The biggest supporter of regulation are large companies. And we've known that from the beginning.
Right.
So, like, for an example, the biggest supporter of the tobacco buyout was the tobacco companies. Why is that? Well, because the tobacco buyout allowed them to now buy tobacco overseas where it was cheaper instead of having to buy it in the States. And so it helps them out, right?
Crafty.
Look at Facebook. They're asking to be regulated by the government. Why? Because regulation means their competition will be locked out. Their competition can't afford to follow the same regulations as they are. So because of that, it helps them. And that is an ongoing, and that's why the biggest supporters of people who propose this, if you look at their campaign donors, it's sometimes the richest people that you would think, why is it that, for an example, we all know Bernie Sanders and all of them are against these corporations, right? And we all know they endorsed Joe Biden. Why is it, though, that Joe Biden had the highest number of billionaires donating to him over Donald Trump did? If his proposals are supposedly taking from them and giving to the people. Well, it's because the regulations actually only ensure the largest corporations survive. Let's look at the simplest one, a $15 an hour minimum wage. You enforce a $15 an hour minimum wage, my coffee shop prices have to go up immediately. However, Starbucks prices, they can wear it out for a year or two. And what happens, meanwhile, is because my prices have to go up, more and more people switch to buying from Starbucks, till eventually my coffee shop has to close. And now Starbucks has the market share. And now once Starbucks has the market share, they can just lift their prices to make up the difference. And
you eliminate your competition.
You've eliminated your competition.
Yeah.
And so that's just how it works. That's when the way our system is set up. It is set up where if you have enough money, you can buy yourself a seat at the table. And when you have a seat at the table, people listen to you. It doesn't matter if and it's not necessarily out of the worst things in the world. I know for me personally, I care about small business, right? So with our platform, we're being as loud and as vocal as we can to make sure we have a seat at the table to get small business ideas considered. If I owned Amazon, I would also want Amazon's issues considered. It's just a profit incentive, right? And the way, though, however, our election system and political system is set up, I can buy my seat at the table. It doesn't make Jeff Bezos an evil guy.
Right.
He's responding the same way any of us would.
Businessman.
Right. Yeah.
And the government's responding the same way you would, too. If you're worried about getting reelected, keeping your job, and you need money to run ads to be reelected, and you have somebody who gives a lot of money so you can run ads, you would also talk to that person.
Right.
It doesn't need to be this great grand conspiracy about Soros's money and everything else. It doesn't have to be. It's very clear. And so what we've seen with COVID, though, is these policymakers and governors and things are making policies with a stroke of a pen that are very clearly, they're very just extreme regulation, if we look at it that way. They're just super extreme regulation, more extreme than just here's a tax or here's a new permit or here's a new license.
Yep.
If we just look at it as a very extreme regulation, and regulation in this country has always been affected by large interests coming in and buying their way a seat at the table to speak in the ear of these politicians. We're just seeing that amplified. And it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. It's always what's been going on. We're just seeing it brought to the extreme.
A little more evident now.
Yeah, we're seeing it brought to the extreme. And like I said, America works as a whole off profit incentives.
So I got a question, kind of getting back to you're talking about with your.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
No, it's fine. No, it's with your closing. Like I want people to kind of. I think a lot of people will take this to heart. Is like, how did you make the decision? What led you to the decision to be like, no?
I had to go on food stamps a week prior.
Really?
That was what it was. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I literally had to go on food stamps. I went from being worth like $3 million to having to go on food stamps a week prior.
What?
Yeah. And if I had to close the coffee shop and lose it, I didn't have a path forward. I didn't have a way I was going to come back from that.
Okay, hang on a second.
Yeah, I can show you. Do you want to see the food stamp card?
Yeah, it's okay.
I have it.
Hold on,
I believe you
a
100%.
second,
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying,
I was also
just-
approved for government health care, too.
so you're talking about worth
$3 million. Now, keep in mind, worth $3 million doesn't mean I have $3 million in
Right.
the bank.
Right.
But
Businesses and investments, things like that.
But to give it some idea, we're probably doing, as a family, right around $6,000-7,000 a month. Actually, into our family, we weren't going on vacations like crazy, but we were at a point where I didn't have to worry about, when I needed gas, I got gas and I filled it up. Right. If we wanted to go out and eat for, $10 a person every night, we could. Mm-hmm. So I went from that in January
to have to get on food stamps.
To being on food stamps, yeah, a week prior.
That message right there, I think, is the ticket. That is the key that will relate to people right now. Yes, I'm not trying to turn this on me. I'm a medical provider now, and
Mm-hmm.
we were on food stamps growing up. I know what that's like.
Yeah, we've been there.
I know what it's like to.
It's my first time on government assistance.
Yeah, I know what it's like to get that government cheese, that government peanut butter. I know exactly what it's like. I know what it's like to be on food stamps. I know what it's like to be in a home and have snow coming through the cracks of a log house in the bedroom and having to hang up quilts to block off certain heat from certain areas just so you can stay warm enough. And it's a shame that in 2020, with all the technologies and all the opportunities, that we're reverting backwards almost to those situations. Some people have worked their whole life like you have, and you've got to a point of success. And then because of one man's pin swipe, this is what we're doing.
Well,
Period. And I'm not trying to put all the blame on one person. It's policies, procedures. I think a lot of it is, but it also comes down from the federal government. It comes down from perceptions of the way things
and that's
are.
Where I will blame it on one person, only because, and I use this analogy a few times. If I know the fire department isn't coming and I light my house on fire and it burns down, is it the fire department's fault or is it my fault?
All right.
So if I close my state, knowing financial relief isn't coming, knowing my unemployment system's broke, like broke is, it doesn't function and broke monetarily. Knowing that that's the case, and I do it anyway, that doesn't advocate my responsibility from it.
Right.
And so I think that's.
But take it on a smaller scale. That's exactly what you did with your business.
Right.
You had no choice.
Well, and
right.
I think,
You said something online. You weighed out your pros or cons. You realized it was going to be more harmful to you to close down.
well, at the end of the day, if I'm saying that, if I close and I say so from the health department, that was her actual name, walks in and
wow.
So fitting.
and
No,
she walks in and says, you have to close your business.
That was her actual name.
And I say, well, if I close my business to indoor dining and then in 2 weeks I can't pay my rent, and so I lose my business anyways, what's my incentive to close?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Take away my business? I already was losing it. I'm going to lose it anyways.
Have it anyway.
At least if I stay open, I have a shot
Yeah.
at somehow staying open. And I say this to you today. If I had closed, Brewed would not be open right now. I promise you, it wouldn't be open. I mean, it literally couldn't happen. And the $10,000 they were offering was nothing. And let's also say that, let's talk about the government assistance, right? Now you say, well, how's this possible? Let's keep in mind, I have still an EIDL loan for $15,000 that I was approved for, that I signed for, that they had messed up one digit of my bank account on. And I've yet to get that money because of that. And I was approved for it 6 months ago. So it's not just so you say, well, how's your business so close to the edge? Well, it's because of things like that. They know I'm close to the edge. Yeah. I should have another. So with Andy's money and that EIDL loan, I should have $25K in the bank. So I could pay my $3,700 rent and also be able to close and pay my house rent of $1,200 and pay my car payments of $1,000 and pay my rent and pay for my food for a couple of months. I should be able to. But because the government has failed to even get me the money that I was approved for, because they know I need it to continue, they have put me in a position where I can't comply.
Yeah, there's still videos circling Facebook and stuff of those unemployment lines in Frankfurt where they were supposed to get unemployment money in February, March, April,
also too,
and they've still not seen a dime of it.
Well, also too, when the if so, this is what too. I know they renewed it with this recent bill, but with that bill ending, and that money ending, that extra money a week or a month or whatever that you're supposed to get from the federal government, if your unemployment claim isn't processed by the end of that, you're not getting that money. So because the state failed to process your unemployment in time, it was literally going to cost people thousands of dollars they would have normally gotten.
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
And then also, if you're 1099, which the federal government stepped in to help out people who are 1099, you weren't going to get unemployment now that you would have gotten if they had processed it in time. So this is on a timeline. It is on a timeline.
Right.
And I posted on our account yesterday. They have no clue even how much they still owe. They don't know. The state auditor, a couple days ago in an article said, when I asked him how much they still owed, it went anywhere from a couple $100 million to $2 billion. And they finally came back with $511 million. And then when we asked them to estimate things farther back, they said there's no way we could possibly tell you that.
Good Lord.
And so they have no idea how much money they need to ask the Senate to budget for unemployment this year. They don't even know.
Holy smokes, man.
It's unreal.
It's been 10 months since this thing started. And you can't even tell us how much money you need to pay the 81,000 people who are in backlog. You don't even know. And also, how do you know how much money you need to ask the employers to be chipping in?
Yeah.
You have no clue.
When are people going to start holding other people, even ourselves, really, but our government elected officials, our mayors, our city councilmen, our whoever it might be? We've talked about this several times. Responsible.
So,
like, what process do you go through to be like, you know what, this is your expectations, and if you don't meet these expectations, here's our option to do that. And I'm not talking about just like, conspiracies and impeachments and stuff like that. I mean, just like the people coming together and being like,
so there's
enough.
one person in every county you can hold accountable for closures, and that is the sheriffs. If the sheriff refuses to do something, so let's say so let's take for an example us, right? Okay. This next time, if they decide to close down businesses, and the sheriff comes out and says, "I will not close down a business," every single business in that county doesn't have to close.
Really?
Yes, because you don't have anybody to enforce it. And if the local PD tries to enforce it, the sheriffs can arrest the local PD and force a court case over whether or not that's constitutional. So that's the first person you can hold accountable. Anything bad that happens in your county is because of your sheriff. Because your sheriff isn't stepping in to say, I will not enforce that. That's who it ultimately... Sheriffs actually have the most amount of power. The sheriffs...
Even over like environmental health and safety.
Right.
With the state.
Here's the problem, though. They got to get somebody to enforce it. Environmental health and safety doesn't have an enforcement arm. They don't have people with guns to come and arrest me when I tell them to screw off. Right? They have to have the sheriffs or local PD do that, or KSP. If KSP or local PD comes in to do something, the sheriffs can show up and say, that is unconstitutional. We're not going to allow that.
I did not know that.
And they are an elected official. So, and that is enshrined in Kentucky's state constitution as well. So that's the first person you can hold accountable is your sheriffs, because that's our check and balances, right? Is that the legislative branch, which when the governor is issuing executive orders, he's functioning as the legislative branch, which is a problem. But when that's going on, they have to have somebody enforce it. That's our check and balance. And so if the sheriffs say no, you have no problem. So they're a little secret. There are parts of California, there are parts of all these states that are locked down where businesses are fully open. And they're fully open because the sheriff said, I'm not enforcing it. Mm. And if more sheriffs did that, these lockdowns would stop.
Is there another option for the states to be like, well, the sheriff said this, but we're going to do this instead? What else could there be?
So the other options, right? So it is and this is where, and this is why bars have been attacked so heavily, is your liquor licenses. So liquor licenses are issued by the state. So though they can't get the sheriff to enforce it, the ABC can come in and pull your liquor license. Yeah. And then if you're selling alcohol without a license, you're now committing a federal crime, which is why you're seeing bars being come after so hard.
There's definitely loopholes.
Okay.
And so that becomes an issue, right?
So whenever Bashir sent the KSP
to come pull our liquor license,
or to the churches,
right?
Remember, they were at some churches, they were getting license plate numbers
right.
and all this stuff, and he was trying to shut these churches down initially, right?
Right.
So at that moment in time, the sheriff had authority to.
The sheriff could have showed up and arrested
no.
the KSP officers for some crime. So let's say it is breaking a person's First Amendment rights. And so, you're interceding on their ability for free speech. Mm-hmm. They could have arrested the KSP officers. And then that would have forced the courts to now get involved. Instead, you had to have my attorney, Chris Weiss, take the governor's orders to court and argue they're unconstitutional, which he did win. But we wouldn't have to be paying attorneys and getting attorneys to go fight this if the sheriffs would show up and just say, no, you can't do it. I'm going to arrest you if you do. Because that immediately forces it into the courts.
And maybe it's a thing of, and I'm not knocking any sheriffs at all, individually attacking anybody, but in Kentucky, a lot of these small towns, it's a good old boy system. Right. It's like, oh, this is so-and-so's son, and so-and-so's this, so-and-so's this, and his dad was a sheriff so many years ago, and man, we're going to get this guy in, he's just a good guy, and all his deputies are his buddies, and you know what I'm saying? It's just like, that's just how, maybe it's a thing of education, of being like educating the public and the sheriffs on, this is a major responsibility that you have to ensure that...
I don't disagree. We're actually having an event there mid-January of a sheriff called Sheriff Mack out in Arizona, and he talks about what sheriffs can actually do and not do. He's a sheriff. Yeah. And he's actually coming out and doing a speaking event in Lexington that we're inviting all the sheriffs to in Kentucky so they can understand what can they actually do and what can't they. Because a lot of sheriffs have no clue.
Well, it'd be really good to keep a head count of who shows up, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Be a way to do a little check and balance, keep people accountable.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, at least learn more about what you can and can't do, right?
Yep.
I think this is a good opportunity to expand this farther. I'm not trying to get off topic of your business and this whole COVID
right,
thing.
Right, and I can go into that story there, but it just kind of, just conversation.
Well, I think this is a good opportunity to, one of our missions here at Firestone is like our creed, prepare, respond, serve. That's what we do. We train for local communities to prepare to whatever event it might be, respond and serve that community. That's our goal. Individually, prepare yourself so you can respond and serve because you may be that first responder. One of our big missions and goals that we have, and we've had from even when we were another business entity, was preparing for mass casualty and mass disasters within the community, period. Our biggest problem, I guess you would say, was getting these community leaders together. All right, because you would have fire saying, "Well, we run the show." Local PD, no, we run the show. The sheriff's like, "No, we run the show." The mayor, the superintendent, all these people trying to get together and come to a conclusion like, who's accountable right now for the safety in your community? Mm-hmm. Period. Like, who's accountable? What method do you have in plan at your school if there's an active shooter? What method do you have in plan at your church if there's an active shooter or an active aggressor? What is it at a local high school football game if there's something that goes on? Like, what do you all have? And like, they pass the buck to the other person, or want to have ego.
Always be the sheriff.
Yeah, or they want to have ego measuring competitions. It's like, well, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. It's like, listen, enough of the BS.
Yeah.
Be accountable for the people in your community.
And you want it to be the sheriff. You know why? Because they're the only person in policing that's directly elected by the people.
Right.
You don't want it to be the mayor because they can just blame it on the chief of police, and the chief of police isn't really elected. They're hired. And, you know, the more you can pass the buck, the easier it is, to your point, compared to if you say the sheriff is responsible for the safety of the community, period, end of story.
And that's the entire county, even in the city limits.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why where I'm at now, the special operations team is run by the sheriff's department.
Right.
Because they cover the entire county. So
Right.
if something happens in the city or in the county, either one, they have jurisdiction there where they have to have that special ops team.
In the counties themselves, sheriffs will always have the highest jurisdiction. I mean, KSP can come and try to get involved, and the sheriff can be like, "Nope, it's ours." I mean, there would have to be a major court case to take something away from the sheriff.
There is one person, I've always been told this, there's one person that can arrest a sheriff in the county, and it's the coroner.
Mm-hmm. I've been told that too.
Yeah.
Really?
I've been told that technically, if the sheriff won't
if he's
enforce something, you go to the coroner.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Wow. I don't know.
I've heard you can go to the coroner and get and they can.
I've always heard he's the only person in the county that can arrest the sheriff.
Right.
But if you're having upper management, upper government, whatever it is, your governor, whoever that's doing this pin swipe, causing all these problems,
Sure.
and it trickles down all the way to the bottom, and you've got your small businesses trying to adapt and overcome these problems to keep their employees
Sure.
fed, to keep them employed, to keep their families fed, to pay for their own home, to do all this stuff. That's the essence of people standing up and being like, here's what but your voice and your.
Well, and that's where how we're fighting back, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to expect the Franklin County Sheriff to go arrest Andy Bashir. He could if he wanted
Right.
to. He could, and nobody could stop him. I mean, and he would take it to the courts, and it would be adjudicated, and he'd probably be released. But he could at least arrest him.
But
Well, I don't even mean on that level. I mean like individual community. Every county in the state needs to be like. The sheriffs need to look and be like, my county's falling apart. Like, we've got to do something to help you guys out.
Here's the bottom line, and this is what I think and what we're fighting for too, as well as we do this, right? Mm-hmm. So right now in the state of Kentucky, indoor dining is open. It's only open because of essentially two people, three-ish people, and a group, and a group of four, and this is why it's open. Me and Richard, who own Beans, said, we will go to jail if we have to. And we dared them to do it. We then had an amazing attorney, Chris Weiss, who represented both of us. And then we also had a coalition of about 3 or 4 business owners headed up by Fernando, who came from Cuba and was arrested 3 times in Cuba for making sandwiches. So he had a very powerful story that started this petition, and they got about 1,000 restaurants to sign it. What the petition stated is at the end of this executive order, even if you renew it, we are opening to 50% dining. And then, because we had a great attorney and we were daring enough to do so, myself, especially in this case, because of just they handled my case differently than they handled Richard's. Can I swear on this?
yeah, sure.
Okay.
We got a beep option.
Okay.
Right? We're good. So
Okay. We just turned this into a giant show for them. We turned closing 1 or 2 places down into this embarrassing show.
Just wreaked havoc.
I mean, that's what happened. I mean, let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
We literally when they closed us to indoor dining, food trucks started showing up outside. People could still eat inside. And literally every day, Andy's being asked, why is Brewed still open? Why is Brewed still open? Why? What are you going to do about it? You can't do anything about it, can you? Right? And we turned it in because the worst thing he could have done in that situation was arrest us.
Yeah.
That was the worst thing he could have done. Because how many people would be pissed if you arrested a guy for making a cup of coffee? Oh my gosh, the entire country would be upset at Andy, right? And so what happened was, so we had this coalition also going off this petition. So through our case of them trying to close us, we created a case law. And in our case law, first we created that really these should be handled by civil courts, because actually the Lexington Police Department and the sheriff refused to enforce the initial order.
Yeah, so that was the very first time I ever heard of Brewed, was a Facebook post that the health services called LPD.
And they said, nope.
And they said, yeah, no.
No, we're not doing that.
Really?
So so comes in. I should get back to the story. Comes in, tries to close me, and I'm like, I don't want to. And so she leaves, and she calls her supervisor and is like, I don't know what to do. And the supervisor was like,
I've never been told no.
Go in there and serve them these paperworks and ask them to sign. So she comes in, and they're recording her again, and she's really nervous. She has to come into the kitchen. So I thought, well, maybe she's just there to do her inspection, right? And I'm like...
Which they never did, correct?
Eventually.
But I mean, during this whole...
While they were there.
Yeah.
No. I thought, well,
which is why they were there, supposedly.
Right. And so I was like, maybe she just wants to do the inspection. So it's like, okay, come on back to the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And she just came back there because she was a little nervous about the videotaping, and I understood that. And so, and so she's like, all right, I need you to sign this. And I was like, I'm not signing that. Like, what are you thinking? I just told you I wouldn't close my restaurant. You think I'm going to sign that little piece of paper? Like, heck no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And so she goes, okay, well, I got to call my supervisor. And he said, he'll be out. So she calls her supervisor. And so in the meantime, the have sent up the call. And so we get about 30, 40 people out there. 20 people. I don't know.
How big of a time period was this?
It happened over like 3 hours. So she calls, and that's when goes up. And is a special kind of so shows up to the situation not wanting to de-escalate at all, right? Like, honestly...
So he was on a mission.
Yeah, it could have been handled a completely different way from the beginning, and maybe I would have reconsidered, But they didn't. They put me in a position where, like, close now. And I was like, well, I know financially I can't... if they had been like, listen, we're going to give you a day. We really need you to close. We'll give you a day to, like, think about it. I could have sat down. I could have considered some things, called up my parents, been like, listen, and tell me if I close. What should I do? Maybe I could have asked the community to help me out, right? A couple different options. Mm-hmm. But they didn't. So shows up ready to keep this thing going, right? And he shows up and he says, you have to close right now, or I'm going to call the police. They're going to come out. They're going to close you, and we're going to close you down. And I was like, let's call him.
You use my phone?
Let's see what happens, right? I'm like, let's see what happens. So this tells you that here's a special kind of he goes out to his truck. Now keep in mind, you have a guy who's refusing to close. Whether you realize it or not, I am refusing to close because I can't afford to. I'm worried about my family, right? I'm worried about survival. And if you come out and close me, you're definitely like saying your business is done for, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I'm closing somebody's business, I'm a little remorseful. I feel terrible about it. He goes out to his truck, pulls out a ball and glove, and starts playing catch with himself in the parking lot. I am not kidding you. That is what he did.
Are you serious?
What?
Yeah, I'm dead serious. He pulled out a ball and a glove and was throwing the ball up in the air and catching it. As he, in his mind, is waiting on the police to come close me down.
I want to meet this guy.
I mean, and I'm just like...
I think he needs a friend with another glove. Like, I'm going to feel bad, Right. I'm like, and he dropped the ball like 2-3 times. He's chasing across the lot a couple times. And I'm like... My goodness gracious, man.
Why is this? Why would you do this? Like, of all the things, right? And so he goes out there. He's waiting on the cops. Cops aren't coming. So he comes back in and basically says, well, to my surprise, the cops aren't coming. And as far as we're concerned, you're closed. And he taped a closed sign to my front door. Well, I had a person in there who is currently in a lawsuit with the health department over that's gone federal now. It's a federal lawsuit. And so they said you need to ask them for a hearing. So I go, I want a hearing. Apparently I had to say it out loud and he's got to acknowledge it. That's what I was told. And so far, that seems to be accurate. Nobody's told me that was an inaccurate statement.
Okay.
So I said, I need a hearing. He doesn't acknowledge anything. He puts a sign on the door saying I'm closed. I grab the sign. I follow him out. I'm like, I want a hearing. And he turns around and goes, okay, finally. But now we're out at his truck, okay?
Right.
And I'm about as far away from him as I am from you. And you'll know this because something happens later on where he mentions how far apart I am from him. So I'm holding the closed sign. I'm like, I want a hearing. He's like, okay, I heard you. And I was like, what does this mean? What happens if I keep operating? And he wouldn't tell me. I'm like, what does this mean? I swear a little bit. I was like, are you going to pay my effing rent? Like, what's this mean, right? He goes, well, you're closed. And I looked around inside and I saw the people inside and I leaned out to him. I was like, I don't feel closed. I was like, I'm like, I don't feel very closed. I just don't. And there's people in there buying things right now. Like, I disagree with you that I'm closed, right?
Yeah.
And, we're going back and forth. And I actually said something along the lines of, notice how I'm wearing a mask right now and you're not. Because I figured you cared about it and I respect your personal wishes enough that I'm willing to wear a mask for you. And he goes, well, I'm not wearing a mask because we're 6 feet apart. So tell me how I ever got in his personal space if I'm 6 feet apart from him.
Right.
And he never had to put on a mask.
Blake, can you put one of those little ding light bulb things there? That'd be good.
Well, and also, too, let's remember, too, in the court case, when he was being asked about it, he said he never felt threatened enough to call the police back out. So he himself admitted he never felt threatened.
So where did he accuse you? Was it a Facebook post? Was it a
No, it was the news
interview?
started asking, and the news is like, oh, crap. Or the health department was like, oh, crap, we got to come up with something to make this guy look bad, because right now, public sentiment is in his favor. So they try to be like, well, he got aggressive and verbally assaulting. And that's what they try to run with. The news asked me about it. I feel like I quashed it pretty easily, but of course, the sensationalism of he got into an altercation with the health department. But even if it was a lot worse, the guy's still closing down my business. I mean, there's a lot of things that are justified. But mainly, police never came out. Nothing ever happened. That's really not much of a story there. But they did, lie under oath when they were in court. But, whatever.
Why ruin a good story?
Yeah, right. So, and so he leaves. And I posted online. I said something along the lines of, you stop getting your coffee from Brewed once they pull me out of here in handcuffs. Well, the news all starts showing up. And they start covering it. And then all of a sudden we start getting lines out the door, And the next day, we've got lines out the door. We run out of food. The next day...
Really?
We've got lines out the door, and then the constable or the ABC showed up and pulled my license, so I did stop serving alcohol. And then the constable showed up and served me civil paperwork, and so there's a hearing to be held in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever. But there was an emergency injunctive hearing that was to be heard before that, and that's the hearing that everybody can watch online.
All right.
And so we keep serving till the hearing, and the hearing occurs. And there's a lot of interesting things in the hearing. What I thought was most interesting was, my attorney brought up the fact that, hey, on a regular basis, they host events. So they should be allowed to have at least 25 people in their place. Which started the judge to ask the question of, wait a second, what is the difference between an event venue
That's what exactly
and a
a note
restaurant?
I have on here. Yes.
The judge started being like, what is the difference? And when asked, the attorney for the health department says, I don't know. I didn't write the order.
Yeah, we just enforce it.
We just enforce it. Like, literally, he was saying himself, I have no clue.
Yep.
Like,
That's
and
what I got here.
let's keep in mind, at that same time...
And I thought whenever that judge said that, I thought, this might just be over at this point.
It might be. I mean, that's what we were like, maybe it might be. We do it as a long shot to begin with, just because we got to think about what you're asking that judge to do, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what people got to remember. Like, when I know a lot of people, is this whole voting thing's going on with the vote counts and stuff, with the presidential election. You got to keep in mind what you're asking judges to do. And sometimes, even if maybe something is right or wrong, the amount of shakeup it would cause means a lot of judges don't want to touch it at all. So a lot of times they're like, but because keep in mind, at the same time, eating food alone does not designate the difference between an event venue and a restaurant. Because at the same time, you could go eat in casinos, you could go eat food and drink food in a theater. Yeah. So like at the same time, you couldn't go get a hot dog at a theater because they couldn't prepare it, but you could go get popcorn and a Coke and sit and watch the movie and eat your popcorn and drink your Coke. And that was fine. And so it became very unclear what is an event venue and what's not. And so the judge said, well, we got to think about it. Next day, right before the courts were about to close, he issues his thing saying, yeah, I'm going to grant this injunctive order for them to close. However, I'm going to grant your bond you requested, but not in the amount we requested, which was some ridiculous amount we just picked out of the air, kind of. But was rather a lesser amount of $5,000. Okay, and so for people who don't understand what that means, because a lot of people are very confused on this part, even though it is the most important part about that case. Okay, is that a bond in a civil injunctive hearing is granted, is a thing you have to kind of post. So what they're saying is an injunctive hearing does not mean we're making a decision over whether or not Brewed should be open. It means we're making a decision on whether or not Brewed should be closed until the case to hear whether or not Brewed should be open. In that time frame, if we close Brewed now and then wait those 3 weeks for the hearing, and then it's found that Brewed should have been open, those 3 weeks has cost Brewed that money. And Brewed shouldn't have to go and sue the health department to get that money back for those 3 weeks, because you're the one asking for the injunctive hearing. So what the bond said was that the health department had to post an amount of money to close us for those 3 weeks. So that way, if it was found in our favor at the hearing, that $5,000 would immediately be ours to pay us for the damages that had occurred to us through the wrongful case or the last 3 weeks. Does it make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
But if they won that case, that money would be returned to them. Now, the courts have to hold that money until the case is over. So our bond was rather small. If we had submitted better financial paperwork with it, probably would have been larger, but we didn't really know how important the bond would come in. Basically, though, it established that if, 100 restaurants opened and ignored the order, they literally didn't have the money to close them. And if you can't close all of them, you can't close one of them, because now that's selective enforcement. So basically, our case set it up to where even if only 10% out of the 1,000 restaurants that signed the petition saying they're going to open at 50%, whether or not you lifted anyways, stayed open, the state couldn't have done anything.
So your $5,000 could have been like a precedence for however many other ones they might have tried to close.
Right. So if you
try
to close another 100,
times.
And let's say the average bond, because it varies based upon size and scope and amount of revenue and stuff. But and let's say you submit your financial paperwork too. So let's say we put that and it becomes $15,000 is the average bond. They now have to post $1.5 million in bonds to close down restaurant dining. And they don't and keep in mind too, our budgets work in our state, that money has to come from the health department. And the health department's budgets are already set. So they can't just go get more money from the state to post the bond.
That is genius.
And it's at the end of the year.
Yeah. So
that is genius. Yes.
So they lose their ability to enforce it at all. And that's what became the problem, was that, and what was quickly realized, and this is kind of what we stumped for elsewhere, is it really doesn't matter if it's legal or not legal or anything else, right? Just like, let's take something that is clearly illegal and should be murder.
Right.
If 1 million people just start murdering people, there's an enforcement issue.
Yep.
So if a couple hundred or a couple thousand businesses in a state just start being open and say, screw you, there's an enforcement issue now.
Right.
And it becomes not worth it, especially if public opinion is in the favor of the businesses, or at least 40% of it is, that it doesn't become worth it to enforce it.
Yeah.
And that's the situation we set up for in Kentucky. Wow. We had a couple of very loud, outspoken places, myself and Beans, that, and you know, I think I got a little more media attention than them. I don't know. But one is we executed a good PR response because we didn't argue about whether or not COVID existed. We didn't argue over the numbers. We didn't argue over any of that. We literally just said, you're failing to even take into account restaurants. You know, they say, well, we talked to the experts. Okay, if you're closing a restaurant, maybe you should call in an expert on restaurants at the same time you're talking to a infectious disease specialist, because that infectious disease specialist has no idea anything about restaurants.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're approaching it from, I mean, you know, obviously people are around each other, diseases are going to spread, so let's close it. Like that's their only thought process. And so basically, it set up a situation where he had to reopen. So magically, on the 17th, when his order expired, he reopened to exactly what the petition demanded. And when he announced he was reopening, it was the Friday before. It was also the largest number of cases and deaths we've had in a day in Kentucky. Now, I'm not saying that to make light of anything. What I'm saying is he did not. The science did not support him reopening.
That contradicts everything that he's gone. He stood against his whole entire time.
Right.
Because you get the highest number of cases, why are you going to start reopening things? Because he realized financially.
And he realized it was a losing battle. It was going to make him look terrible.
Yeah.
Because here's the other little secret.
Where's his intent?
Well, here's the other little secret too. Part of the reason why we followed the judge's restraining order is because my son's birthday was in like 2-3 days, and I didn't want to get arrested and miss it. But my son's birthday was over. So I was like, let's go. I mean, literally, my conversation with my lawyers was keep me under a month, and I'm good. I mean, that was it. Yeah. I mean, that was our conversations. Yeah. And so, you know, and they quickly understood that too, so there's also an interesting thing that goes over a lot of people's head that don't understand. The fact we had criminal attorneys listening to that hearing on our side, I don't know if you guys picked up on that watching the hearing, signaled something to everybody else. And it signaled we were maybe willing to take it farther than they expected us to.
Yeah.
Because we had criminal attorneys sitting there saying, if this goes criminal, I have representation. And in a civil case, the only way it goes criminal is if I in contempt of the judge's order.
I was going to ask about that. Was that just a bluff from the system when because I heard that go? I was like, well, we can charge him with contempt.
So what can happen is they can decide to only do civil contempt, which could be something as small as a fine. It could be something like, okay, go arrest him, and we're holding him in jail, and every day we're sending somebody to be like, are you going to close Brewed today? And if I'm like, no, then, you know, okay, you're in jail for another day, and then they leave, right? So every day Brewed would operate, I'd be sitting in jail. Or they could go as far as to close down the business anyways and go out and put chains on the door and things like that, and then charge me with criminal contempt. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so that was part of the discussion as well. So there's some charges in there they could get in there. There was. Just like they dropped them, but they tried to charge Richard with operating a business without a license, which is operating a restaurant without a health department license, which is a crime. But what we did was a little more eloquent than just saying, no, we're not going to follow the order. So we looked at the order, we looked at the mandate, and we said, you know what? By taking away your food license, you are now an event venue. And you can eat inside event venues.
Thank you.
Insert ding. Light bulb.
And so, you know, if a food truck or wherever you get food from just shows up outside and you buy food from it, you can go inside, sit down, and eat it. Mm-hmm. And so somehow the next day, a food truck knew to show up. And it also was very kind enough to hire our staff to work for it.
Wow.
It also bought from us our coffee equipment, but then sold it back to us at the end of the day. Our coffee equipment.
Wow.
And so, yeah, the food truck, and it's a smart business move. I mean, I also would start selling coffee out of my food truck as well if I was outside of a coffee shop that was no longer a coffee shop, right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
But the problem is they didn't bring cups. But we had cups.
Oh, that
so
worked.
people, people would come in and they could buy a cup from us. I mean, I don't know why they wanted our cups so much, but, supply and demand. So we started charging like $2-3 for the cup.
Yeah.
But then, the food trucks, I mean, they felt bad charging for the coffee considering they didn't have cups. So they were just telling people if you had cups, you could just have the coffee, And so, just a real interesting situation.
That's neat how that works out.
I know.
Can you tell us the name of this food truck that showed up?
Oh, geez, there's a couple different ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Kyle's Kitchen
Okay.
was one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go support these guys.
Boston's Way was another, and Burgers and More was a third one. And so, yeah, they would, show up, and they were able to show up and sell food there. So, which then caused the news to show up and be like, hold on. Are you breaking the judge's order? And I was like, no, I'm following it. I am not preparing or serving food. Well, the health department calls up my lawyer and goes, hey, your guy has a food truck out in front of his place. And my lawyer responds with, oh, sounds like something he would do. And they go, well, he can't do that. My lawyer's like, what do you mean? They're like, he can't have people. He can't do that. He's a restaurant. He can't have people in there eating. He goes, no. He's an event venue. They're like, no, he's a restaurant. He's a restaurant. And he's like, how can he be a restaurant? You took away his food license. So every day a food truck showed up, and we'd let people know that it had showed up through creative means. Every day the governor was asked why people were still allowed to eat inside a restaurant, now event space, and he couldn't come out and say, because I wrote a order. And so, I believe there's one time where he said, well, they think they found a way around the law, but good luck with the liabilities. He said something like that on one of his about us. And so the health department, realizing this was turning into a nightmare for them, begged my lawyer to give us back our food license.
What a turn of events. How about that?
And so about 3 days before the mandates to indoor dining was supposed to lift, and we knew the governor had already said he wasn't going to renew it. If he had, we would have been talking a different story. But 3-4 days beforehand, we entered into a deal with the health department. They gave us back our food license, and we couldn't do dine-in for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And, 3 days is a lot shorter than 3 weeks. And, I did want to have a business on the other side of it. And so I said, okay. And, it was part of the agreement was, the food truck shenanigans had to stop and everything else. And so I was like, I don't own those food trucks. I don't know what you're talking about. But anyways. And so, we now have our food license back. We sell coffee every day, everything else. We don't have our alcohol license back. That's only because that's a little bit more of a process, but we'll get that back too. But then the governor and so the case is between us and the county, right? Mm-hmm. And so the county declined to try to ask to hold us in contempt for the whole food truck shenanigans. But the state of Cabinet and Health and Family Services and the governor really wanted me to be held in contempt and wanted that to go to case. Mm-hmm. And so they filed to intercede onto the case. They had actually misfiled their paperwork.
Shocker.
And so it got bounced to like another week anyways. And then by the time it got bounced, the mandates had lifted, and the judge was like, No. Judge is like, I'm not going to let you get involved. It's over now. He has his food license back. He entered into a deal with the county. So, no, you can't get involved in the case. So the entire thing was dismissed.
Awesome.
And so let's recap what happened. Governor issues mandate. I don't close. I then essentially operate for 3 weeks anyways. I then get my food license back and open indoor dining for the whole rest of the state through the process.
Here, man. That is awesome.
So when we sit there and we make jokes about winning, like, I cut a video where I was dropping some coffee off to the governor, where I said, better luck next time, love Brewed, in the note. We actually did win. We may not have won in court in the traditional sense. But
that was something I had to ask is, do you feel like everything got dropped because it was coming up on that 12/13/2020 date?
Well, let's remember, he didn't renew the order.
Right, but now that you explain it, right.
He didn't renew the order, even though he had higher numbers than he did before because of things we were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it feels like a win. I mean, let's call spade a spade. I operated for 3 weeks,
right? I agree.
And my business is still here. Which, more importantly, and this is why we speak in some different places now, is we have the ability to say nothing happened to me. We operated, and nothing happened. They can't do anything. And they can't do anything because you have a weird mix of law enforcement saying, I really don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
Legislators who really don't like it. Judges who really don't want to get involved at this point. You have a mixed feelings amongst the public where they feel differently about it. And so it's created this situation where you can't really actually do anything if people just don't do it. And so basically we go around talking about what would happen if X amount of places in your state stood up and said no. And what we're finding in a lot of these states, there is a lot of businesses that are open. The thing is they're not enforcing anything on them because they don't want to turn it into a shit show like Andy Bashir did with us.
So are you getting a lot of requests from other states as well?
So it's a little mixed. So here's the problem. If I get asked by an individual business to be like, okay, I want you to come help open our state, my first question I always ask that business is, are you ready to go to jail? Because if you're not going into this prepared to go to jail, you're not going into this prepared enough to say, I'm going to be very, very public about this. Because that's part of the problem. You have to be very public that you are open.
Yeah.
Because it forces the media to start covering you. And it forces the media to start asking the police, the sheriffs, the governors, why is this place open? And if they aren't doing anything about it, then that goes into the media as like, these places are open and nothing's happening, which will cause others to open. If, however, they do start to do something, you can now execute our situation where you can basically... What's called spade. We trolled the governor into opening up our state. And so you can basically troll your governor into opening up your state by executing a situation where you have good PR mixed with right messaging, right? Mixed with telling the truth about what's going on and making sure small business is being heard. And you also need an attorney. To give you an idea of how fantastic my attorney was, Chris Weiss, they cited us for mass violations, and they cited us for one. The first one they cited us for, and then they followed up the next day, cited us for the second one. It was like a $50 ticket. And my attorney was like, we want jury trial. He's like, I want a hearing. Like over a $50 ticket, we were prepared to put 6 people into the jury box and be like, how do you feel about mass? And the health department was like, we really don't want this argument because it gets really iffy. So I'll give you an example of why we were cited. Once again, all my staff wear masks. So we were cited because there was a person in there not wearing a mask. Now let's remember, HIPAA law states, if you say you have an exemption, I have to take you at your word.
Yeah.
I can't dig into it any more than that.
Right.
But the health department comes out and says, well, listen, if you provide reasonable accommodation, then they have to wear a mask in here. So what reasonable accommodation in the health department's world is, if I offer curbside for my coffee, then I have to require a mask to anybody who walks in, because if you want my coffee, I can just run it out to you. Now, first off, let's remember, I'm not just selling coffee. I'm selling a community space you can sit in. And also, at the same time, I'd also love to know where that interpretation of reasonable accommodation was when we were putting in wheelchair ramps. But, but as well, I have a gentleman that I know very well. His name's if you guys know who that is, you should have him on. He's a retired Green Beret. He lives in Lexington. Him and his wife own Robertson Health Food. And he has a mask exemption. Now, St. Joe issued it right before St. Joe was told by administration that they could no longer issue mask exemptions. So these hospitals are being told that even if a person would normally qualify for a mask exemption, to not issue it.
What?
Okay? Yes. And so he's got a lawsuit he's working on against St. Joe because he could no longer see his primary practitioner and his psychologist because he can't wear a mask based upon the mask exemption he was issued to by them before this. But because he can't wear a mask, they can no longer see him.
What?
Wow.
And so when I told this health department lady, I said, what you're asking me to do. Now, does anybody want to know why has a mask exemption? Because he got blown up serving his country.
Yeah.
And has some issues where he can't wear one. He also has hearing aids. He's got an eye patch because he lost an eye. And because he got blown up serving his country, he now can't come into my coffee shop and drink a cup of coffee. That's what they were asking me to do. And I was like, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And it got so bad with the health department. I had to threaten to call the police to get them to leave.
Wow.
Really?
They were literally standing at our door, laying hands on our customers that were coming in without a mask. And they would say, "You can't come in here without a mask." And they're like,
When was this?
This was they came out to do their reinspection about 3 days before the mandate lifted. They came out to do the reinspection for our opening. Okay. And there was some disconnect going on between the higher ups and the lawyer at the health department and these people, because the higher ups and the lawyer at the health department was like, "Listen, we want them to pass because if they don't, they keep doing this BS and we keep getting in trouble." Right. But these people came out and they were taking it personal because, of course, of the issue that occurred with the other inspectors. There's only 4 inspectors in the entire city of Lexington. So we've so far met 2 of them, and the other 2 were the ones out here doing the inspection. And so they came out, and I was not there, and I did that on purpose because I didn't want to, create any kind of issues. So my wife was there. They came out and they did their inspection, and we got a 99 out of 100, and they cited us for a crumb in a bin that they said we would store food in it, even though it was an empty, like, gray dishes bin. There's like a crumb in it, and we got cited for dishes being improperly dried because the 2 bins we used to do coffee had some droplets of water in them. So that's what we got cited
How
for.
dare you?
I know. Right?
Filthy.
You lost my support.
That is a danger to public health.
Mm-hmm.
So
Water drop.
So we got a 99 out of 100, which is still pretty good. And then after they write it out, a customer had walked in, and we served them. And they go, they need to put on a mask. Or, no. Sorry. It started first with them saying, "Your sign on your door isn't correct." And so my wife pulls out a thing and says, "What do you want me to write?" They're like, "Well, I think I have one out in the car, but if people come in, you got to require a mask." My wife is like, "Listen, show me in the order where if a person has a medical exemption, they're not allowed to come into the building." It doesn't exist. But they're like, "Show it to me."
Be
The
bad
health
to discriminate
department
against
lady,
people with disabilities, wouldn't it?
it sounds a lot like it. And we kept saying that word. So you're asking me to discriminate. She's like, "I don't like that word."
Of course they don't.
That's what
They're
it
like,
is.
"Can we use a different word?" And I'm like, "No." So they go, I was like, "Find us the order." They pulled out, I'm not kidding you, they pulled out an email from several months ago from somebody else at the health department telling them that's how it was. And they said, see? And I was like, geez, last time I checked, a memo doesn't write laws.
Right.
I was like, I don't think that's the case. And so we were like, no, we're not going to deny service. And so they were hanging out outside. Somebody came in not wearing a mask, and they got like in this person's face. And they started arguing with my customer over their mask mandate or exemption. My customer's like, no, I have a mask exemption. And they're like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Those don't exist. And it just, they got into it. And I'm like, and then she starts like, I guess, sitting right by the front door and started like attacking every customer that came in without a mask and was like physically blocking them and like putting hands on them. And my wife finally was like, listen, I'm going to have to call the police if you don't leave. And so they left because they've done their inspection. So now you need a warrant.
Right.
And so they left. They came back the next day, cited us again for someone else not wearing a mask. And so we said, well, we'd really like hearings on this. And so they dropped it, saying that as long as when somebody came in not wearing a mask, we said something like, I see you're not wearing a mask. I'm going to assume you have a medical exemption. Yeah. Basically, exactly what our sign says.
Yeah.
Right. And is that in the order, executive order, that you must verbally say,
No.
I am assuming that you have a medical condition?
No, it is not.
Exactly.
It is not. No, and that's part of the problem too.
You can't just whip up rules and
this is what I'm pointing out too. This is the precedent we're setting, and this is what scares me the most about how much inactiveness we're seeing from our state legislature. Yeah. And some of them want to do things, and a lot of them don't want to do things.
But there's a video that I sent that it was this guy, and he was talking. He said, COVID killed my son.
Yeah, I've seen that.
But it wasn't COVID. The kid hung himself.
Right.
And that is such a tragedy. And it's stuff that we see. And until these government leaders start having empathy, like we talked about, and they're held accountable, I don't.
Well, those statistics are out there. Like suicide rates have gone through the roof, overdoses, child abuse cases. They're just exploded.
And here's the thing: pride comes before the fall, and that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't. It's crappy to say this, but it's not popular to say, oh, sorry, I was wrong the last 10 months.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
Right.
And let's take a look at closing private schools. Why do you think you need to close private schools? You think it's because the teacher unions were putting pressure on him to close private schools because people were switching over to private schools, leaving public schools because they want their kid to go to school?
Yeah.
Possibility.
And that's who got Andy elected, was the teachers unions.
Yeah.
So, do you know about the town of Bristol, Tennessee?
I know of
What
it.
about it?
So literally down the middle of downtown Bristol, Tennessee, is a street called State Street. One half is Tennessee, one half is Virginia. Virginia's on lockdown. Tennessee's wide open. The town of Virginia, Bristol, Virginia, is being decimated. It's literally going bankrupt. Meanwhile, Bristol, Tennessee has a surplus on the year.
Yeah.
Because people are literally walking right across the street. Now, I have to ask you, as a governor of Virginia, maybe you make a special allocation for that town. Because it just makes you look ridiculous that I can literally go across the street, sit down, drink, eat, have a good time, go across the street, can't do a single thing. It's literally just crossing a street.
Well, I mean, it's been happening like that the whole time because people's been going to Nashville to go out.
I mean,
to
look
eat
at
or whatever.
Louisville.
Go to Indiana. Right.
Yeah.
People cross the river in Indiana.
Louisville is dying.
Because and Indiana's growing.
Yeah.
And it's like, stop and think. Leave it up to these towns to make a couple decisions too. I'm sorry, but the local restaurant in town doesn't need to close because Lexington's having an outbreak or Louisville's having an outbreak.
Louisville's got a anyway, so.
Well, he's a big problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised he hasn't been removed yet.
Nah.
I mean, but anyways, the way we're approaching this is not a way, and that's where I spoke earlier. If we had approached this from the beginning with that Fifth Amendment takings clause idea, where if we close a business, we have to compensate it. If we close something for greater good, if we take your property for greater good, Fifth Amendment takings clause, we have to compensate you for it. Okay? It doesn't say the government can't take your stuff for greater good. It says you have to be compensated. If we looked at it that way, we wouldn't be just looking at things town by town. We'd be looking at it and industry by industry. We'd be looking at it from place to place. If I know if I close that, the government's got to come up with $20,000, I'm going to, one, pay for people to check to see what's safe. And two, I might suddenly start investing in technologies like, hey, if this ventilation system add-on works, which, somebody dropped one off to me, I forget what it's called. It's like RMO or something like that. But they dropped one off to me to check out. I haven't done anything with it. But if that works, and it's just a plug-in that you just put into your ventilation system, and now you don't have to wear masks in the place, and and it cuts down supposedly COVID from 6 feet to 3 feet because it ionizes the air. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know. But anyways, you understand what I'm saying, though.
I got you.
If those technologies exist, which apparently they do, because they're leaving open these large venues and airplanes and stuff, using that as a defense. Maybe you should be paying for that inside these businesses instead of paying for 20, 30, 40, 50 grand in EIDL loans and then unemployment and all these other things. It seems just like that would have been a much better solution.
Did they put those in the strip clubs that stayed open?
That's what I was just thinking, man.
No. No, I heard they do a lot of testing in the strip clubs.
Yeah.
Though I just heard recently though they added COVID onto their testing regimen. They were just testing before, so. No, what's funny is on Facebook, somebody started commenting on things. This lady who's she used club girl is their preferred words, right? So was like, oh, you're attacking strip clubs, which I was not attacking strip clubs. Okay, let's be very clear. There was something else that was open the entire time, hookah bars. But those are more locally owned and things like that. So I wasn't attacking saying strip clubs should be closed. I'm saying everything should be open. But I'm pointing out the arbitrariness of it. But she got upset. And she started being like, oh, you're going to be real upset when you got a bunch of club girls protesting out in front of your coffee shop. It's like, so you're going to take my coffee shop, put a bunch of strippers out in front protesting?
And I don't have to pay you?
I'm like, oh no.
This might help business. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like, between noon and 5 is best.
That's the thing, man. Is people cherry pick, and that's the problem. They pick who they want to apply to the rules.
Well, and what's crazy too is when you think that we were getting hate online literally a week prior for doing something that a week later was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that.
Right.
We were getting hate for something that a week prior was fine, that now a week later is not fine.
Yeah.
And then you want to sit there and be like, well, so like, for an example, there's an entity that's trying to kick us off of it because of what we did. And they said, well, you disobeyed the governor's orders. And that's like the reasoning behind it. Like, well, you disobeyed the governor's orders. You can't do that. And I'm like, well, let me ask you something. Do you know why indoor dining's open now? She's like, yeah. And I kind of told her the whole story about it too to make sure she understood. She's like, yeah, I see that. I recognize that. I'm like, okay, if we were able to troll the governor into opening up indoor dining, what was his original order based on then? Like, if his orders are that malleable,
Sincere,
if they're that easy to change, that we were able to change it, you got to ask yourself a question like, do they really matter in the first? Like if that makes sense, that mental connection isn't being made.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap this up, I guess, what resource do you have for other people to reach out if their business is struggling?
Sure.
Like what can they do? Because I think that's the thing is like, because who knows what the future's going to hold? It may start getting worse later.
It may
be like, hey, I need some resource now so I can start planning ahead.
Right.
So what can they do there?
So here's the thing, and I like I said, I made a post on our social media about this. So because of this, and a lot of businesses don't want to get involved in the quote unquote politics of a situation,
Right. Which
I completely agree with. I myself don't. In fact, when I go into other businesses, I mainly wear a mask, not because I think necessarily they work great or I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but mainly because I don't want that business to be put into a political situation where they're having to make a stand one way or another. And so, and I understand that. So one thing is, we don't need to be quiet anymore. Because we don't need to worry about offending people because we already have offended whoever we're going to offend, right? And a lot of businesses are viewing us as a mouthpiece for their concerns.
Yeah.
And I understand why, because we've thrown that off. We can be vocal. So one is if there's a specific problem you're having in your industry, anywhere in the U.S., or a mandate or a government overreach, whether it's COVID related or not, send us a message if you need some attention brought to it, and we'll draw attention to it. And the other thing we'd said is, listen, activism type companies is not new. You got Ben & Jerry's, you got Starbucks, you got Nike, right? You've got every single business went online during, the Black Lives Matter protests and made some statement about race or protested advertising on Facebook or changed the profile picture black, or they get a black, the black square,
Right.
or give to certain charities or give to certain causes they believe in, right? And so I said, that's not new. So we're doing the same thing. We're getting more directly involved. And also at the same time, one side of this discussion has had people involved, companies involved in this culture war, just about every company involved in the culture war. Now you kind of have another place that's getting involved in the culture war. We are from the other side. The only difference between us and them is we were forced into it.
Yeah.
And what we're advocating for is for you to not be forced to do anything, right? So if you have any concerns about that, contact us. We can shine light on it, 1. 2, we are willing to, like, where we're going to Minnesota, we're going to things, or I've talked to some certain businesses that are willing. We will come help you. We won't even just help you raise funds and a lot of people who buy our coffee, things like that are supporting us. So most of that money is going towards, like things like getting out here, giving money to these other fights that people are having. That's where it's going. We're not trying to necessarily profit off anything. We're just trying to keep the fight kind of going in these people in places too that are more affected than us. But we can bring light, we can bring resources. We have a network of attorneys we work with now. We've been through the fight, and that's the thing, is a lot of these groups that are trying to reopen, or lawyers that talk about it, and some come to mind, like constitutional law, things like that. They're not business owners.
Right.
Me being a business owner, I can help you. I mean, there's one that got out in California, they got their license pulled because out in California you can't do outdoor dining even right now.
Yeah.
And they got their license pulled because individuals had bought food from them, sat outside on a public bench that's like cemented into the ground, ate it, and then the health department saw it and pulled their license.
Unreal.
And I called them up and I said, listen.
That makes me angry. I'm sorry, but it just does.
It pisses you off.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're like, what the heck is wrong with people?
What kind of country we live in.
I know. So I called them up. So they're still operating without a license, but they're only doing to-go still. And I called them and I said, listen, open to indoor dining. 1, I'll bring staff. I'll come work the line with you if I have to. So 1, being a restaurant owner, sometimes you get overloaded with business, or you don't, or your staff will quit. Maybe you're worried about that, right? So basically, by saying, "Hey, listen, I'm a business owner. I run a restaurant. I can bring other staff with me. I can come out. Me and my wife, I can come out there and help you just work the line. Even can help." 2. Saying, hey, we will give. So the offer I made to them was, I'll donate $500 into your legal defense fight, and I'll help you find an attorney to work pro bono for you on this if you're willing to open to indoor dining. Mm-hmm. And, we offered to come out, and we'll help the other restaurants in the area kind of get the petition thing going and see if we can get some other ones to open up, right? And so we're waiting to hear back from them, but that's an example of kind of what we're doing.
That's kind of like your mission. Yeah. How can they contact you? What number? What? Just go to Brewed website?
You can go to our website, shoot us an email. You can go to our Facebook page, message us. If you want to buy our coffee, you can go to brewedco.com or shop.brewedco.com.
And we can put a link below.
And you can buy our coffee. You support us there and our mission of what we're doing. And then on top of that, too, as well, we also want to help with different disaster reliefs and things like that as well. So just really volunteering into our community. And like I said, we're not just going to donate money to this random charity or something and then pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
That's not what we need right now. Our chambers of commerces are failing us. Our associations are failing us. They're not doing anything. What we need is businesses like ours who have thrown off the facade, you could say, or have been forced into this fight in such a way that we can be much more vocal than you can as a business owner. And we can represent your wants, your needs, your wishes for you and basically demand some action for you. So that's kind of what we're doing. Obviously, this is new to us, so it's a changing kind of thing. But the number one thing we want to do is get all states open to 50% dining ASAP.
Right.
So, and the hardest part about that, honestly, is finding a restaurant willing to be
do that,
vocal
Yeah.
about being open.
Yeah.
There's so many of them that are open.
But there's got to be so many that was in your position, had nothing to lose.
Right.
Right.
They got to be out there.
Right. But the problem is like the only difference between me and them was maybe the only difference between me and them, I don't know. I mean, I didn't know what would happen when I pushed back. And maybe they're worried about if they push back, something worse is going to happen to them than losing their business. Maybe they think they're going to lose their business and go to jail. Right. And that is something that a business owner coming alongside of saying, I will not let that happen. The community will not let that happen.
Right.
You will not permanently lose your business, period. It won't happen.
Right. Yeah.
That can certainly help out.
All right. Well, so they can get in contact with you on your website. They can get in contact with you through social media if need be. And I think we need to kind of, I want to put this out there too. I mean, this is not just a CYA thing at all. I want people to know that we don't take the COVID virus lightly. I
we
think
see it every day.
We do. We see it every day.
COVID.
Yeah, I've seen very sick people from it. I've seen people who have it that have no idea they even have it. You know what I'm saying? Like there's the spectrum is broad, but the purpose of this podcast is to focus on what can we do to adapt and overcome to still maintain our own income, to still be able to support our families, to still keep this country open, to still keep our states open.
Well, if you notice, I didn't say fully open, no mandates.
Right.
I said 50%.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I said, hey, we got to keep
Right.
people 6 feet apart.
Yeah. And
Which we do.
even with us, with our organization, our job is to provide even medical training, is to provide first responder training, is to be able to provide training for the communities to be prepared for a mass disaster. But even some of the government agencies that give that certification, they say you can't hold in-person training right now.
Yeah.
So even with our business, as much as what we want to do, we can't even give a certification because we're limited by
for
that.
a disaster to happen that people are training.
Exactly. So that's kind of why we're doing these podcasts. Is we're trying to increase awareness to these things so changes can happen. So anything else that you got that you want to share?
No, nothing really.
I thank you so much for coming on. Seriously,
well, thank you for your time.
You gave of yourself, you gave your time, you came down here with us, and hopefully this podcast will definitely help people all across this country, even across the world, because this podcast is in other countries, and we want other people to know that maybe you can look back on this and adapt it to your situation, whatever you can possibly do, because so many people are suffering, and we want to try to help those people. That's our goal here.
Absolutely.
So, all right, guys, support Brewed. Honest to goodness, I'm not just saying this. This is got to be the best coffee I've tasted. And I'm not joking. I've never had poured over coffee until I had it at your store, and I was like, holy smokes, that is so good.
It's good coffee.
It's delicious. And
we took time to figure out our beans and everything else. We did put a care in it.
You can definitely tell.
Well,
and I think that's part of what works so well with this. It wouldn't have happened so well if our coffee sucked.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
right. Yeah. No, when you came in today, you were like, oh, no, you got too much acidity. You got to do this. You got to do this grams. And I was like, what? But once your coffee was better than mine, I'll give you that. So
I don't know. Your most recent one wasn't bad.
Well, thank you.
That was better.
If you ever want a job, just...
I got it. Maybe. Yeah. But we thank you, man. We really appreciate it. We'll put a link to your store below. So whatever you all go and want to buy coffee, want to buy gear, supplies, whatever, that goes to them. They can turn around and have outreach to help other people as well.
Absolutely.
So it's not just going to their pocket. It's going to help other people and help this country to reopen.
Yeah, if you're looking for a new coffee to support,
Yes.
after the Black Rifle thing.
Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
I was not saying like it happened, at the perfect time.
That's that's.
I stopped supporting Black Rifle and immediately found Brewed, and
Yeah.
worked out perfect.
It's unbelievable. So check it out, guys. Really check it out. It's good. I got this one. at your shop, and then you brought this one down today, and
That one's new.
yeah, the 1776,
Uh-huh.
that French roasted.
Yeah, I got your.
French roasted 1776 coffee.
I got some of the K
Historically
cups while I
clever.
was there last time, and they were
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah,
the Kenyan K cups.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Kenya's a good.
Yeah,
Well, good deal. Thank you so much. We appreciate what you do. Thanks for taking a stand for not only your employees, but for Kentucky and for the country. Last question. Put you on the spot. You didn't know I was going to ask this. You ready?
Yeah.
You ever thought about running for public office?
I have been approached. I have been approached.
Didn't expect that answer.
You know, it's something to think about. You know, I didn't go to like college or anything, so I'm kind of. But at the same time,
I think some people that do go to college in their office have proven that's not what
Right.
it's
yeah,
about.
sometimes that's
what
a
is
problem.
it? I worry maybe I don't have enough experience, and then I look at Andy and I'm like,
Yeah, I'm good.
I might have a
but,
shot here.
I might. I don't know. We'll see. You know, we'll see whichever way I feel I can make most amount of change.
There you go. What's that movie with Jim Carrey where he's trying to hit on that girl and he's like, what's my odds? She's like, 1 in a million. He's like, so you're saying I got a chance?
Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
Dumb and Dumber,
So
yeah.
you're saying I got a chance.
Yeah.
That's right.
There it is. So anyway.
And like, I want to point out a couple of lessons. Number one, that sometimes all it takes is just being vocal
Yeah.
to prevent or to stop that government overreach.
Yeah.
You know,
just do what's right.
you know-
if you do something that's right, other people will follow, even if they're not being loud about it.
Our last one, we just recorded a podcast last week. Exact
You're right.
line from our podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, and just like, that quote, the only thing necessary for evil to prosper is for good men do nothing.
Do nothing.
So if we just sit back and take it, they're gonna take
Right.
it.
It's not about overthrowing the government. It's about standing up for your rights and
Yeah.
letting the government be represented by the people's wants
Yeah.
and the
Right.
people's needs and what the people are voting for
Yeah.
and want. You
Well,
know? So that's what it's about.
Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's right, and just because something's
Exactly.
illegal
Absolutely.
doesn't mean it's wrong.
Exactly.
And then sometimes you can fight a better fight when you've got nothing else to lose, versus when your opponent's got something to lose.
Right.
Good
deal.
So
For sure.
All right, guys, that's it for us. You can check 5 Stone out at 5stoneusa.com. Again, the number 5, 5stoneusa.com on the social media sites as well. Our podcasts are open up on everywhere now: Apple, Amazon, iHeart, Stitcher, Spotify, all
Share
of them.
it.
So yeah,
Please.
yeah, that's
Please.
right. Subscribe, share. I always forget to say that. Subscribe, share, because that's the
Like
only
it.
way the word's going to get out.
Review it if you're on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, we do need. Yeah,
Yeah.
more reviews, thumbs up, like, shares, whatever.
yeah, we love the comments. and
Listen, don't be
reviews.
a jerk. Don't listen to the whole thing and then don't share it. Like, that's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
saying.
Yeah, that's just shady.
Do the right thing.
That's right. Do what your heart tells you the right thing, like, clicking the buttons and shit.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Till next time, thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
This has been a production of 5 Stone. I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to check out our podcast and videocast today. You can check us out online at 5stoneusa.com. That's the number 5, 5stoneusa.com. We are also on all the social media platforms. Our podcasts are now live. Videocasts are on YouTube, and our audio podcasts are on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, all the major podcast platforms. Thank you, guys. Again, we cannot thank you much for all your support and all that you do for us. Remember, prepare, respond, and serve, because someday you might be that first responder.